But coming up later, Dr. Supriyanto will host the rest of the talk and discussion. It is our pleasure to have Professor Rob F. Mudde, Professor of Multiphase, Flow, and Distinguished Professor of Science Education, Executive Board of Delft University of Technology. And we are currently holding the discussion series on Excellent Research Culture, Volume 5, with the topic, Scientific Excellence is a Process, not a State. And without further ado, we would like to ask Professor Wirahadi Kusuma to give the opening speech. Please.
Ya, terima kasih Pak Willy. Again, welcome to our esteemed honorable guest, Professor Robert Mudde. He is the Vice Rector Magnificus, Vice President Education, Distinguished Professor in Science Education, Executive Board of Delft University of Technology. Warmest greetings from all of us in Bandung. Kawan-kawan ITB, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Institute Teknologi Bandung has worked very, very hard to make contributions in the advancement of science and technology through our academic and research excellence, as well as community engagement programs. In our 101-year journey, ITB has been the national leader in advancing science, technology, art, social, and humanities as well. However, as an adaptive learning community, we understand the need to always improving ourselves. So one of our efforts is today, we are hosting one of the discussion series, inviting prominent speakers such as yourself, Professor Mudde, to learn more, particularly on how to further build our excellent academic and research culture. TU Delft has been a part of ITB since the very beginning. Bapak Abel Strefland, he was here in Bandung for maybe a few years ago. In his book titled The Shared History of TU Delft and Bandung Institute of Technology, he explains that on July 3rd, 1920, the first rector of the college in Bandung, Professor Jan Klopper, in his speech, he wished to model the Bandung Technical College on Delft. The relationship between Delft and Bandung has continued after we became Institut Teknologi Bandung in 1959. And I also think that Professor Klopper's ambition to model the school on Delft has been realized today. And to continue our tradition, we will always preserve a campus with academic atmosphere that is open to new ideas and experiences, critical and visionary thoughts, accompanied by attitudes that uphold academic freedom in scientific and cultural diversity. Professor Mudde, we understand that research culture is built based on long-standing experiences such as best practices, consistency, dynamic processes, such as our failures and our successes. Excellent research community in university is the cultural structure based around the attitude, behavior of the staff, the students, that allow the excellent transfer of knowledge. The resulting values will give continuation of research activities, resulting in passionate scientists and networks for research collaborations among scientists, universities, and worldwide research institutions. We do cherish one of our biggest assets, which is the research networks, including with your institution, TU Delft. For the purpose of maintaining impactful networks and collaborations, we understand we need trust, research culture, and shared awareness to continue making innovation for society. the main stakeholders of science. Today, we are very grateful to have Professor Robert Mudde to share his insights about these very strategic issues for ITB's future. We would also like to hear a little bit about your work on TU Delft document titled Impact for a Better Society, TU Delft Strategic Framework 2018-2024. Maybe we can pick up some things from your work there. And finally, I hope this presentation could inspire all of us in spite of our exhaustion during this very, very difficult time, because we believe that with every difficulty, there is a relief. We will continue striving together and always be hopeful for better tomorrow. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih.
Waalaikumsalam. Thank you very much, Professor Wirahadikusuma, for the warm welcoming. Before we begin, shall we take a group photo with Professor Mudde, real quick? And for participants, kindly make yourself visible. Pak Yanto, you may start.
Okay. 1, 2, 3. Next page. 1, 2, 3. Next page. 1, 2, 3. Next page. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, done, Pak.
All right, moving on. We are about to start the talk. I will pass on to Dr. Supriyanto to host the talk. Please, Dr. Supriyanto.
Kasih mute, Mas.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Dr. Denny, and also thank you for our rector, Professor Reni, to give opening remarks today. And I am introduce myself. I am Supriyanto. I will give as moderator on this talk today. And first, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon for our college that join with discussion sharing on excellent research culture today, and also for Prof Mudde. I guess now in Delft, still in the morning. Good morning, Morgan, for the Netherlands. As we mentioned before, we have a special guest, Professor Mudde from Delft University of Technology, TU Delft, Netherlands. So before Prof Mudde will give a keynote talk, I will give a short introduction, CV Prof Mudde. So currently, Prof Mudde has a vice rector manifest, Vice President Education in Executive Board TU Delft since 2018, and he also professor in Multiphase Flow and distinguished professor of science education. He also the executive board of the Royal Netherlands Society of Engineers. And Professor Mudde has a long track record at TU Delft. He has filled various scientific and managerial positions with the university since 1988 until his appointment as Vice Rector Magnificus. He was interim chairman of the Imaging Physics Department of the Faculty of Applied Science and headed the TU Delft Teaching Academic and Teaching Lab. So he also played a leading role in the development of the TU Delft vision on education as chairman of Education Task Force in the run-up to the institution plan Impact for the Better Society TU Delft Strategic Framework 2018 and 2024. So Before I give time to Prof Mudde, a general rule, after Professor Mudde give a lecture, we invite our college, if have any question, please to write on the chat room or the raise hand. Now I invite Prof Mudde to give a keynote talk. So now time is yours. Please, Prof Mudde, to give a keynote talk today.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll share my screen, try to do that so that you don't have to constantly look at my face, but have some images with what I'm telling. See whether I can get that working. All right, I hope that you now can all see my PowerPoint presentation. Thanks for having me online for this event on the occasion of the centennial celebrations of the Bandung Institute of Technology. First of all, I would like to offer ITB my belated congratulations. Let me see whether this works for the next sheet. Yep. It's an important anniversary. Unfortunately, the COVID crisis meant that many events could not take place or were delayed. I would have loved to come over to Indonesia to join celebrations in person, but that was unfortunately not possible. I hope to be able to make that journey somewhere in the future. Things are still very uncertain, however, and we can only hope for better times ahead for all of us. One thing we learned since last year, though, is that it is still possible to organize meaningful events online. And that even means that people who might not have been able to join in a real life event can now join online. So I'm proud and honored to be able to be with you here today, even if it's not in person. Of course, ITB and TU Delft have a strong bond that has survived over many years and can withstand a distance of halfway across the globe. We share a long history. Over the years, professors and students from TU Delft have found their way to ITB and vice versa. And we have collaborated on many research topics. And we hope to continue to do so for at least another 100 years. And that brings me to something else to share, and that's also today's subject, scientific excellence. As I indicated in my title, I don't believe you can, at some point in your career or in your history as an institution, attain a state of excellence and then sit back and relax. Our search for excellence is an ongoing process rooted in our academic culture, a culture in which we encourage people to challenge themselves and where they receive the necessary support to do so. A culture in which we continually discuss what excellence is and how we can improve ourselves as researchers and as educators. Excellence, then, is not a World Cup or an Olympic medal, admirable as those achievements are. It's not a goal, but it is in fact a means to an end. At TU Delft, we believe we should not only be good at what we do, but what we do should also be good for something. Ultimately, we want our work to make the world a better place. That goal hasn't always been as clear as it is now. For many years, we would measure our position on the excellence scale by more traditional means. The number of publications and citations in high-ranked journals, for example, and our place in international rankings. We still value those things up to a point. We still publish our research naturally, and we are proud of our place in international rankings, but these are not goals as such. The same goes for our education. We could send out new generation of well-educated engineers into the world and be proud of their number and of their grades. But whether they would then use their knowledge to develop irrigation projects in, say, sub-Saharan Africa, or to design bigger, better, and faster sports cars was really up to them. We now aim to train socially responsible engineers and hope they will continue on that path once they graduate. That's not just our merit. Our thinking was also influenced by students and young researchers who joined us with new ideas. and it was more of a gradual and reciprocal process than a single decision. So, over time, our perspective shifted. Much as the world around us changed, and we are now facing a complex set of often interlinked threats to our global future. In a way, technology change leading to ever-increasing industrialization can be said to be at the heart of that. We can and should now turn science and technology in directions that will actually mitigate some or all of those global threats. That is why we see it as our mission to create impact for a better society. And the more we excel, the better we will achieve that goal. Now, around the time we realized that our mission as an organization should be to create impact for a better society, we realized something else. To solve global problems like climate change, we can work on a global scale, engage in international collaboration, travel far and wide to gather information and knowledge. We still do these things to some extent. However, we also have a footprint here in Delft and in the region. So let us not forget that challenges can lie close to home, and we can start having an impact right on our doorsteps. To give you an example, Amsterdam. Our capital city is known for its many historic canals, but what many people visiting the cities don't know is that a lot of these quay walls are in urgent need of repair. The quays, some of them over 300 years old, consist of a brick wall on a timber deck supported by timber piles. Over time, things like timber rot, cracks in the wall, or the deepening of the canal can all weaken such construction. Out of 600 kilometers of quay wall in Amsterdam, 200 kilometers are in need of repair. 50 of them urgently. This became very clear last year when an entire wall of the Grimsbergenkade collapsed. You can see that here on the picture. With the help of what we call forensic engineering, we have investigated the root of that particular problem. And we are continuing this kind of research in order to advise the city of Amsterdam on which case to inspect and repair first to avoid similar disasters elsewhere. We're also looking at smart ways to solve or prevent the problems of quay wall deterioration. That isn't always easy because you cannot, for example, simply stop heavy good traffic in the city, as you need trucks for garbage collection or stocking of local supermarkets. City life continues no matter what. Moreover, Amsterdam is also looking to become CO2 neutral. But a lot of historic buildings are not very energy efficient. So why not combine the two and replace broken walls with innovative quay walls that include a heat exchanger? That way, heat from the Amsterdam canal water could be collected in summer, stored in the subsurface, and be used in the winter. Here, we have a typical Dutch problem, but the knowledge and solution that came out of these projects could well be used elsewhere in the world. Now, when I say we in this example, I don't just mean we at TU Delft. This is a project we are combining forces with other university and research institutes and the city of Amsterdam, in the context of AMS, the Amsterdam Institute of Metropolitan Studies. This is something we are doing more and more. In fact, we are going even further. That is because we have realized that in dealing with the major challenges we are facing in the world, challenges like climate change, the energy transition, increasing urbanization, and an aging population, we need more than just technology. We can only solve such complex and interlinked problems if we pool all our scientific resources. We also need medical science, as well as the social sciences and humanities. So in recent years, we have started a far-reaching collaboration with the universities and medical centers in our region, Rotterdam, Erasmus, and Leiden. It's collaboration that goes beyond interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary research. We try to work no longer side by side, but we want to merge our efforts so that we look at complex challenges in a more holistic way. Take, for example, our projects in the city of Rotterdam, where we are looking at improving the city as a living community with all its aspects. We work on issues related to urban inequality, such as health, debt, and housing. Together with social scientists, we look at this from new perspective. For example, can you design neighborhoods in such a way that the area increases opportunities for the people living there? We're also looking at the future of the port. Here, the energy transition means great changes for port management, for the chemical industry, and for the city and its people. We're also working with Erasmus University on the relationship between port and city. And then there is the issue of climate change. Rotterdam will have to adapt to rising sea levels. We are now, amongst others, working on a new system for climate monitoring. And we are exploring the links between climate and the spread of mosquito-borne diseases. Like in Amsterdam, what we are doing in Rotterdam has local and regional implication, but can certainly also benefit other Delta regions across the world. That is as it has always been. In the past, Dutch and Delft engineers gained an international reputation for the Delta works, the extensive flood defense system that protects the south of our country against floods. That reputation for water management expertise meant that after Hurricane Katrina, the US asked for help from Dutch experts. Starting off in your own region, therefore, doesn't mean you can't export your knowledge elsewhere. One thing is abundantly clear. Hardly any problem can be solved by a single discipline. So the complexity of the challenges we work on means that within our organization, we are working more and more along thematic lines. Researchers from all engineering disciplines group around themes like climate, energy, health, biotechnology, or transport. To encourage and support this, we have set up virtual institutes for these themes, where they can work on joint projects. Another way in which we deal with this complexity is the setting up of joint research lab. By the end of this year, we will have established 24 dedicated TU Delft artificial intelligence labs. In these labs, experts in artificial intelligence foundations will work together with experts in IA challenges. So people working on IA and people working with IA. For example, researchers in machine learning will work together with material scientists on analyzing of existing materials and the development of new materials. Collaboration is key. And in achieving the standard of research, we need that to fulfill our mission. Our graduates will also be working in such multidisciplinary environments on the same complex challenges. So all this has implications for education too. Take, for example, aerospace engineers who start working in the aviation industry. We cannot simply train them to become aircraft manufacturers. Although an airplane is the height of technology, it still takes many disciplines to design and build the various components like the wing, the seats, and the communication equipment. Our students must also be prepared for this. We can no longer educate them in one discipline. They have to have worked in multidisciplinary environments. That is why at TU Delft, we try to educate engineers with a so-called T-shaped profile, meaning they get a thorough grounding in their chosen field, but they are also able to open up their arms wide and embrace other disciplines. other viewpoints and areas of expertise. That will prepare them not only for their first job after graduation, but will also help them to deal with the demands of an ever-changing future. How do we do this? Let me give you a few examples. Master students can join a joint interdisciplinary project, or JIP for short, where groups of students from various programs will work together with businesses on technical innovation. This helps them share their disciplinary knowledge, teach them to think beyond their field of expertise, and improve their analytical and creative skill. It is always something of an eye-opener when students realize that students from another discipline have something meaningful to contribute that they themselves do not know or cannot do. It can sometimes also be an eye-opener for the companies they work with. I'd like to share a quote with you from Roland Nagel of Royal Haskoning. He said, quote, "Of course, we operate at the top of our game and have everything under control until a group of JIP students start asking questions. And suddenly you're not so sure anymore. Then they start collaborating and get to the point where both the company and students grew a lot taller." End of quote. Students can also opt for multidisciplinary minor programs, like the minor Integrated Infrastructure Design. The Netherlands is, as you know, a densely populated country with relatively little space available. And the infrastructure is already highly developed. So it is increasingly complex to fit something new in. In this minor, students learn how to handle this complexity. For 6 months, students with backgrounds in urbanism, landscape design, architectural, civil engineering and technology, policy and management, and so on, work together on real-life assignments for the city of Delft and Rotterdam. They have to delve into questions like, how do you go about designing a bridge or road? And how do you incorporate it in the landscape? The minor also addresses soft skills, such as presentation and consultation, and writing an essay on a piece of infrastructure that intrigues them. This will all help them to become the kind of engineer who are able to look beyond their own discipline. The kind of engineers businesses ask for and society needs. Meanwhile, working in multidisciplinary teams also has consequences for the career path of our academics. We believe it must be very satisfying to work in multidisciplinary teams. It also means your individual contribution to an achievement is less visible. It's not so easy to work yourself into the spotlights that way. That is why in the past few years, we have also been working on a new system of recognition and rewards of our academics. Since 2005, academics were judged largely on the basis of the number of scientific publications and citations expressed in the H index. We are now trying to focus more on what we consider important as an organization, not just on what will achieve the most scientific credits. Again, if we want to succeed in our societal mission, we have to focus less on individual achievements and more on collaboration. So we should also find ways and means of rewarding people for that and allowing to build a career on it. And that is quite a change from the traditional academic culture. And we are not yet there. But step by step, we're moving in the right direction. Again, we are not doing this by ourselves because it has been a long-held wish by the entire Dutch scientific community to move away from counting of publications and citations as the only measure of excellence. And that brings me to another issue on an organizational level. We were used to a very hierarchical institution with professors and their subordinate staff, whose only chance for promotion would be when the incumbent professor would retire. We call that the German system. In recent years, we have moved away from that to a flatter organization structure for a number of reasons. For starters, it is not very inspirational for young talented researchers if you always have to work under the supervision of an elderly professor without any hope of advancement, and where you don't have the freedom to set your own research agenda and choose your own projects. It was very difficult to attract young talented people with such an organization. Moreover, such an organization also tends to create partitions between the disciplines, and that is no longer acceptable if we want to work on those multidisciplinary challenges. Those barriers have to be taken down. Now, in the United States, they have developed the PI system, where principal investigators, PI stands for principal investigators, are lead researchers with a lot of individual freedom. That system works well in some areas. It is how fundamental scientists prefer to work. So, if we want to attract international talent in that field, we will have to offer them a PI appointment. And that is what we do in part of our university. However, in engineering and design subject, teamwork has always been more important. And you will find that researchers in these areas will still flock together and form sections. The difference is that it's no longer the full professor who is in charge and determines the direction of the research. Instead, every research member is partly responsible for getting funding and projects. So a flatter organization structure generally works well for tackling multidisciplinary problems. There's another reason why we could not copy the American system throughout the university, even if we wanted to. That is because we simply don't have the kind of money that universities like Harvard and MIT have. There can be a disadvantage in our quest for excellence. We cannot bring in an unlimited amount of top researchers, as we cannot offer them millions of euros to set up their own labs. Here we are looking for other solutions. In the Netherlands, we don't have a culture yet of alumni donating large sums to their alma mater. But we have found out that our alumni and other well-wishers are often willing to donate smaller sums if they know which particular research project it is going to. They were especially generous last year when we asked them for donations to fund our specific research in ways to deal with the coronavirus. And in a new campaign, Tech for Health, we were asking for contributions for innovations in the field of healthcare. We've also found a group of alumni and friends of TU Delft willing to donate larger sums into our Excellence Fund. These funds we use to attract a few very well-established scientists. One of these is James O'Callaghan, who is the engineer behind Apple's iconic glass stores. He's now our professor of architectural glass. People like James O'Callaghan will in turn attract other young and talented people. Finally, we believe that the way to excellence lies not just in multidisciplinary teams, but also in diversity within teams. With many nationalities on our campus, we are diverse in a certain respect. But in others, we have still a long way to go. One of them is attracting more female students and scientific staff. We're working on that in various ways. And things are by no means like they were a century ago, when the number of female graduates still ran in single digits. But for women to make it to the top in an organization like ours is still all too rare. So I was very pleased to see that ITB is showing us how it's done by appointing its first female rector, Professor Reni Virahari Kusuma. I am hopeful that in the future, we will be appointing a female rector magnificus too, but that will probably be after my retirement, which is in about 4 years, I'm afraid. So, to sum up my contribution to this series, excellence is the means to an end, to fulfill our mission of creating impact for a better society. Secondly, by working on local issues, we can still create knowledge that is valuable in an international setting. Collaboration is key to achieve that in today's world. Fourth, we need to educate our students with a broad outlook so they can work in multidisciplinary environments. Emphasis on collaboration and teamwork also means new ways of recognition for researchers. And finally, creating new ways of primate, alumni funding can help attract some high-profile, high-potential academics, which in turn attracts others. This brings me to the end of my presentation. I would like to thank you for your attention so far. I realize that I have spoken from a very personal and to your Delft point of view. So now I will also be very interested in hearing your points and taking your questions on this subject. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof Mudde, for an impressive talk and for the sharing experience regarding education and research in higher education in TU Delft. So next, we invite the open for question for my colleagues that today join is in this program. So
Pak Satria,
Pak
Satria resign, Mas.
Okay, please, Prof Satria. Still the microphone.
Okay, thank you for Prof Mudde. It's very inspiring, and we are glad to hear that universities such as yours also have its own problem. You know, sometimes when you refer to other university, you could see that, okay, like, you know, they're up in the sky, but you know, from your perspective, it seems that, you know, that's every institution has its own challenges, and we're glad to hear from you that, you know, you also have your own challenges. Now, question is about, you know, solving societal problems. One of the, you mentioned specific problem about this a problem in Amsterdam, which is kind of very interesting. Sometimes in a place like ours, one of the problem, because Indonesia is so diverse, we have so many problems, and sometimes we somehow feel that even we are hopeless as a scientist, as engineers, because of this bureaucracy things, you know, that we could not solve this thing because that's under the authority of certain government agencies or something else. So sometimes we just see helplessly to a problem in our society. So my question is, how could you deal with the authorities in terms of, you know, basically getting access that, yes, we are the university people, the engineers and the scientists sincerely want to basically take our part in solving societal problems. Probably you have experience how to deal with these bureaucrats. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for this question. This is an important point if you want to be active in society rather than in your own labs. And what we notice is that making good connections with, for instance, the city of Amsterdam on a high level is very important, and that we carefully listen to what are your major problems, and that we don't come in with the idea we're going to do research here on topics that we like most. We listen carefully. The K problem of the city was brought to our attention by them. They put that on top of their list as one of the problems that they face and that they need engineering knowledge. Secondly, during the work and the research that we do, we constantly tell them what we find, what we see. So we don't work and then present an end report, but we talk to them and present our findings in between. And we were willing to adapt when they bring in new points in what they see. And last but not least, but a very strong part of what we do and what is very helpful, we invoke our students in the research. They are visible in the streets, they are visible in the research, and usually young people get more done. Bureaucracy for some reason melts due to their energy and the vividness that they bring in. And also the fact that they do it only for education, you know, they don't need money and so on. They just do it to help out and to learn from that. And that opens up. We did the same in Rotterdam, and we do it in the city of Delft also. We go to the underprivileged parts of of our city of Delft with teams of students. And there is guidance from our research staff, but they are in the background. So we thrive a lot on the energy of students and PhD students. And that works. So those are the things that we try and what we learned on. As soon as we come in, here are the engineers, we're going to solve your problem. We're out within an hour. They don't listen. So we have to be modest.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you. The next raise hand, Pak Edwin, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Pak Supriyanto. Professor Mudde, thank you for the presentation. I have 3 questions here. One is, how can you introduce your local issues as to attract international community to use your problem solving, right? Because there are so many products, so many solutions to international problems, but how can you attract those interests? The second is, you mentioned about flat organization. So I think, what would you think about the leadership and versus the individual initiatives? Do you think that TU Delft mostly relies on individual initiative to move forward? Right? And the third one, what do you think about the difference between private sector in Netherlands versus in Indonesia? Aside to the financing problems, but do you think you can identify the difference? Because we also in ITB, we also see that private funding from alumni is one of the strategic funding, but up to now we still cannot attract more attention to it from the alumni. So thank you, Pak Mudde.
All right, thanks for the question. I'll try and answer them all three. It is not such that if our researchers are forced to work on local problems, they still have their own choice. And when we attract new young staff, we do that by offering them possibilities. You can join a team, you can work on this bigger problem. And what we notice is that many of the young people are really intrigued by these local big questions where you can go. Netherlands is a really small country. So it's less than an hour traveling and you're in Amsterdam. It's 20 minutes and you're in the port of Rotterdam. So what you research, you can see. You can talk to the people there. You can talk to the companies involved. So having research questions like this close by, we could have opted to, for instance, rather than researching what happens to Rotterdam, to Shanghai airport. We could have done so. But then you would have to travel 10 hours at least in a plane. And now it's, you could even bike to it if you really want. And that helps. But the bottom line is we don't enforce people. It's a choice and we make it interesting. But if somebody doesn't find it interesting and has his own ideas and funding, fine as well. And that is also tying into the flat organization. A flat organization in our case doesn't mean that an individual does exactly what he or she wants. You're still in some form of group. So it's not the real American PI, I, Robert, research what I really like. No, you fit in a theme. You fit in, and we select people to fit in the themes. So in the attracting of people, we very carefully look whether the ideas that they have align with the things that we need. And the leadership question is really important with us. And I had many discussions with groups and with sections, especially with the older professors like myself, in which they said, yeah, but if I'm no longer kind of in charge, I'm no longer responsible, the responsible is divided, how as a senior do I steer this community? Because you took away my authority. And my answer is, no, your authority is with your seniorship. It's not with that you're appointed to tell what to do. It's that you have the experience, you have the knowledge, you have the network. So just do whatever you did, and you will see that young people happily will listen to your advice. And that's what virtually everywhere happened. Newsters coming in, especially from abroad, don't know how the university functions, don't know how the funding system functions. So they will go to the seniors. How do I do this? But they are responsible for going to the seniors. They are responsible for trying to get their own funding. And it takes about 1 or 2 years in such an organization. When you make it flat, it shakes in the beginning a little bit. The seniors are looking for what is exactly my role. And then they find back, hey, my role is more or less the same, but it's more in a coaching way than in line management. And if you look at how they operate, it's not as flat as you would think. And that's for obvious reason. The seniors have the leadership by the position that they have. But it makes the young people aware of that they need to participate in funding. And what we also just did, you don't have to wait for a professor to retire to fill up that vacancy. In principle, everybody can now be promoted to full professor. Doesn't happen, of course, but in principle, it's up to the individual track. It's no longer whether there's a position is available. And that helps a lot, that gives perspective. Final, the private sector. Yeah, that ties in what the former question was of Professor Buyuk-Sama. The grass on our fields looks, from your perspective, greener than it is. We have a strong private sector in the Netherlands, but they don't spend a gazillion on research. They don't do so. So we still have to try and maneuver and get us in. We still have to talk to them. We still have to negotiate. We still have to work on things that they find relevant. And that works, but we do an awful lot of work for that. We have a specific unit in the university, loosely called the Valorization Center, who is constantly busy with our big industry in keeping them inside our network. Otherwise, it crumbles. No, it's not the US, where they spend a gazillion at Harvard. I'm not sure how that works in Indonesia. And since about 15 years, we are very active in keeping relations with our alumni, because they're at the high position of these companies. So we do that because we like to be in touch with our alumni, but we have an open, a non-hidden agenda that we also need them to keep the contacts warm with the bigger industry in the engineering field. And for that, we organize yearly events for our alumni, both on campus and online. We try to invoke them in the big decisions. When we make our strategic frameworks, we talk to them for what do you see, what is the direction that you think we should go. We invite them in the boards of these thematic labs. What do you see as the needs of your type of industry and so on. So we really try to form a network to kind of signaling to them, we're not only after your money. We're also interested in what you really need and how we can cooperate. That's perhaps the Dutch way of doing, but that's how we try to deal with this. And so far works reasonably well.
Thank you. Clear enough.
Thank you, Prof. Mudde. So we have a question for chat room from Dr. Endra Yulianto. He asked, how the TU Delft is the integration of the research activity in the teaching system?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. We use as the default that all researchers teach and all teachers research. So in that way, so if you look at suppose you have 100% of your time that you can devote to research or education, then the bandwidth that you operate in is 70% to 30%. Holds for virtually everybody. So we hardly have any researchers that spend 100% of their time on research. That is one why we can have the interaction between research and education as we wanted to have. The second is that all our bachelor students do an end project at the end of their 3 years in one of the research groups, and thus are confronted with the research. And the master students do that for about 9 months at the end of their masters. So all students need to do that. And many of the programs have asked the teaching staff and the research staff to change their practicals that we run with the students in their undergrad education, and change them towards practicals that are closely related to the research that the researchers do. It's obviously not the same because it's a practical, but it's along the same topics and with kind of derived questions. That's another way to make sure that students on the way in the teaching get confronted with the research environment. And that turned out to be working pretty well. The price was, we noticed that the burden on the teaching and research staff got higher. So they needed to do more. And in our recognition and rewarding system, we try to make sure that people don't get overloaded with the amount of work that they have to do on both sides. So, hope this answers the question.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Mudde. Next, Prof. Reni, you will direct to ask question to Prof. Mudde.
Okay, please. Okay, thank you. Let me see what was my question. Oh, related to the previous question. So, do you have any tips, specific strategies on balancing faculty engagement in teaching, research, and one more project engagement in the infrastructure projects, for example? So, do you have a specific formulas for managing their performance, maybe incentives, different career paths, or your professor can have like 10% of their time, for example, etc., etc. Thank you, Professor Mudde.
Yeah, it's an excellent question, and we are struggling with that because the idea is simple, but putting it to practice is not so easy. But it ties in with that idea of principal investigator. So what we say to the colleagues, if your career is dominated by research, say you put 70% of your time on the research, 30% on the education, then you're supposed to lead in your field in research. You're supposed to attract your own funding and get your own PhD students and postdocs. You can do it with colleagues, but you are in charge. If you, on the other hand, specialize in teaching and teaching innovation, so spend 70% of your time there, we can't ask those colleagues to do the same and still be principal investigator. There's an awful lot of work and pressure on you to do that. So to those we say, it's perfectly fine if your research line is attached to a principal investigator. You help out there. You help supervise PhD students. You help in writing proposal. You pick up the master end projects with the students and supervise master students. You're not supposed to have a fully standalone big research line, but you are supposed to be active in research, but not as a principal investigator. And we're trying to get this into the system and also into our yearly discussions with the appraisals with all our researchers and teaching staff. And it's a bit of a struggle because we We have measures on how to measure when somebody is excelling in research. We are trying to find similar ways of evaluating how good is somebody in the teaching part. And the bottom line is teaching more and more and more is not necessarily a sign of excellence. Like researching more and more is not necessarily a sign of research excellence. It depends on what you do with it. I'm not sure whether you're familiar with a framework of Ruth Graham, former UK mechanical engineer who is now traveling all over the world thinking about how to do this. And she has set up a framework which helps us trying to see how do we evaluate the progress and the work done in education. And we're trying to set it up. And it's kind of nationwide that we try and do it, because it's very difficult to find examples. Good researchers, everybody knows examples. But good, innovative teaching is much more difficult to find. So we're working on it, and we don't have the answer either. We only know the direction that we want to go. And Rainy, important to us was why we are so keen on this is we found when we made the organization flatter, the workload on the researchers got up. Because you can't, what we used to have, full professor is in charge of the finances, the rest works. Now we no longer have that. Everybody needs to write proposals. And it's an awful lot of work to do. And we saw that people had difficulties putting that in a single week. The word was out that people were working on their educational stuff only in the weekends. And that's, you can't have that. People can do that for a short period, fair enough, fine, nobody worries about it. But if you do that whole year round, then sooner or later people burn out. And so we had to interfere.
Okay.
We had to make sure, don't do it. It's not necessary that you work day and night for the university. Exactly. It's unhealthy for you, and then it's unhealthy for the university. Yes. So that's how we try and steer this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prof Mudde. Thank you, Prof Reni. So next, Prof Yashid will give direct to ask question, or I read from chat.
You can read it, no problem.
Okay. So, Prof Yashid have question about the engineering has been transformed from practical solution objective with the technology product orientation to the engineering science with heavy scientific objective. What is your view on this statement, and what is the effect of relevance of engineering education at this relating to economic impact? Please, Prof Mudde.
Yeah, it's a good point. What we have seen since the 2000 is that our university, which is basically a big school of engineering, became much more science-oriented. The researchers that came in were much more science-oriented, and the requirement to enter the university was a good track record in research. And thus the amount of colleagues with industrial experience in engineering has dropped significantly. We had good reasons to do so, because we noticed that attracting funding worked only if you had a good research track record. So it was kind of a catch. We had to change. But over the years, we also realized that the bigger things that we do is train engineers, graduating 4,000 engineers every year. That's what we do. So that means that we also in that respect try to open up positions for people who have a more engineering background. And we work also in the education. I gave a few examples. We try to bring in companies with their questions, so real life problems from companies, to make sure students get confronted with the engineering world and not only the science part of engineering. And that is going better and better since many companies are getting keen of joining these projects, as they we don't charge them for them. All they bring in is the problem and some supervision on real life engineering in industry. And they notice that our students are capable of providing serious answers. So they get something back. Obviously, it's students, so we don't promise a solution, but the companies are keen to join. And that way we try to balance and keep the connection between the engineering world and our engineering science world. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Thank you. So next, I have question from the chat room from Pak Krishna Suryanto Pribadi. So he has question with scale and complexity of problem now tend to require multi or interdisciplinary approach in research. Unfortunately, our tradition, organization, or institution and the rule are limiting this to happen. What is your suggestion to solve this issue?
Yeah. It's a good question. We obviously face that as well. In 2019, I did a round of interviews with CEOs of big and small companies, asked them what they want us to do with our students, what they needed. And it was very interesting, apart from that it's interesting people to talk to. But what struck me is that they all give more or less the same answer. One, they said, make sure all your graduates understand the fundamentals of their discipline. If they don't have that, we can't use them. That was reassuring because we were struggling with how much interdisciplinary work do we have to put into the curricula, and what is then left for math, physics, and so on, the core of your discipline. And they all said, make sure they understand the fundamentals. At the same time, they said to us, also make sure that they can work in teams, because that's what we do. There's hardly anybody working individual, and most of the colleagues in engineering, that's what they told us, work in 3 teams at the same time. And that got us thinking about these interdisciplinary projects where we make those teams, and we face the same. Curricula are kind of silo-like type of things. So what we are doing is that we turn the elective part into really open electives. For instance, our master program is 2 years. Q5 from 23 onwards needs to be in all the programs elective. That means that still students can follow the elective of their discipline, but at the same time, university-wide, that interdisciplinary project runs. Because you need to align the curricula, otherwise you can't have students from different programs working together. And we do the same in the 5th semester of the bachelor, where there is the big minor, so it's half a year of minor. Students can choose whatever they want. Whatever minor the university offers, they are allowed to take. And that is how we manage to get these parts into standing curricula. Because after all, if you are trained to be a civil engineer, I understand that a company said, but you need to have had mechanics because the bridge needs to stand for 30 years. So that fundament is really important. And we are managing that. So if I talk about making students more aware and working in multidisciplinary projects, we don't try to turn them into people who understand all these disciplines. That's undoable. We want them to be able to cooperate as an aerospace engineer with somebody in biotechnology and be able to communicate and be able to bring in both what you know. That's how we try to do it, because I recognize what you say. We have the same.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very interesting.
So we now we have still have one question from Bonar Marbun. So the question is related with the PISA results from a student in Netherlands. So the main question, this situation is a little bit different with the problem for student in Indonesia. What do you see with this challenge?
Yeah, that's a very good point, because as a university, we are obviously at the end of the education chain. So we really rely on what elementary and high school has done, as that is our starting point. But we talk to one another. So we talk to the high schools on a national level. We talk when the curricula are changed. Currently, they're busy with changing the curricula of the high school. And I'm, on behalf of all Dutch university, involved in those discussions, trying to make the point, be careful with what you change, because we have to work with that. What comes out of high school enters university. We are obliged to our students to try and bring them to the top of the world, but we can't stretch them too far. So if you take out half of the math, we can repair not everything. If you take half out the physics, we cannot repair that all. That's the discussion that we have. And at the same time, understanding that obviously we can't dictate what high schools do. They have their own responsibilities and their own problems. So that is one. The other thing that I see that we could as university improve is, I don't know how you do that, but for a very long time, we have been working with the idea, you come out of high school, this is the level that you reach. On day one, you enter university and you have to step up. But nobody can step up that quickly. Students need time to adapt to the pace of the university, the depth of the university, the different way of how a university as a school operates. So we're changing our introduction, our start. And what we're working on, and that might be helpful for you as well, the start will not be the start of the new academic year. We will invite students prior to summer to be engaged in stuff that we do at university via online means. We now all learn how that works. It's loosely called pre-university. And for instance, we have a pre-university physics course online that students who come to our university can do on their own. There is no grading. If you don't do it, fine with us as well. But we make it interesting and challenging so that they'll busy in the summer. And by that, we can help them reach the level that we require prior to coming to university, rather than having to do that in the first 3-4 weeks. We are working also now on mathematics to do the same, to help them reach the level that is required with us. If a high school didn't reach that completely, they can pick that up in 2-3 months, completely online, as I said. And from the physics that we did, that worked remarkably well. Students, the potential students that come to us were interested. They were thrilled by the material, and obviously we took into account that they do it in their free time. So it's also fun to do. We didn't put in the dry and hard theoretical stuff, but we made it interesting for them to follow. We made it such that they could work on it. And we have TAs that help out if they have questions. So if they get stuck, they can contact the TA during such the online sessions and get feedback and help. That's how we try to do it, because don't be fooled. Our high school system is pretty okay, but not all students come prepared at the same level. That's not true. And that's how we try to even out and help those students who missed a bit of education or were in a school that wasn't exactly the level that we need, which happens also, especially in the underprivileged parts of the big cities. So that's how we try and do it.
Thank you, Prof. Mudde. So finally, to this time, we have a limited time also. I think when we continue discuss, probably only problem and question from audience. So therefore, I must stop this discussion. But I hope in the near future, we can invite you again, or I can ask you to give recommendation, the other name of college in Delft, or maybe other college in Netherlands, could be invited, could give talk in this session. So finally, many thanks for Prof. Mudde for sharing your idea and recommendation during discussion today. And also please send warm greeting to our colleague in TU Delft. Again, thank you very much. Thank you and tot ziens.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much, Pak.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Prof Mudde.
Thank you, Prof Mudde.
You're welcome. You're all very
Thanks a lot,
welcome.
Prof Mudde.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Terima kasih semua yang sudah hadir.
Terima kasih Pak
Sehat-sehat.
PPM, makasih Prof Mudde.
Terima kasih Bapak Ibu semuanya.
Bye-bye.
Stay safe. Pak Erwin, terima kasih rangkumannya.
Ya Pak, sama-sama Pak.
Terima kasih Bapak Ibu.
Terima kasih Pak Joko.
Sehat-sehat. Terima kasih Pak Supri.
Saya pamit dulu ya.
Terima kasih banyak Pak Joko.
Oh, sama-sama. Terima kasih Bu.
Terima kasih Pak Supri.
Krisna, terima kasih.
Buat semua.
Bisa rekamannya masih bisa dilihat di YouTube juga Pak Krisna. Jadi kalau mau di-share juga bisa.
Panjang mungkin kalau rekaman.
Nanti,
ada yang
sampaikan
tempat merangkum 1-2 lembar itu akan lebih menarik, akan sangat membantu terutama buat yang tidak sempat ikut.
Baik, nanti kami share lewat grup dan lewat kita kirimkan ke para dekan supaya di-share ke komunitas masing-masing.
Terima kasih.